I wanted to take time in this video and kind of walk through a crawl space that we had the chance to visit that had reported condensation issues. So here's an overall picture of this crawl space. It's in South Florida. The ground is essentially just fill rock over soil. That's all of this area in here and over here, and really throughout the entire crawl space. Now, of course, you can see that there's some debris down here, as is typical of crawl space. But generally speaking, the floor of the crawl space is open ground with filled fill rock, and it importantly didn't have a vapor barrier like a Stego vapor barrier installed to control moisture coming up from the ground. So this didn't have any kind of product like that in this area on the ground. And it would typically, of course, get turned up and terminated or and treated in a way that it was continuous to protect the crawl space. The other thing you'll notice here is that the top side of the crawl space, which of course would be the concrete slab of the structure above it, was treated with spray foam insulation. That's what you see here in green. And so spray foam was applied, and it was intended to be the insulating barrier between the crawl space and the concrete slab of the structure above it. They even went as far as wrapping the concrete beams with insulation as well, and not just in between the concrete beams. So they treated the entire bottom of the slab with spray foam insulation. And this was intended to be naturally ventilated. So they had vents around the perimeter that the design intent was that it would provide sufficient ventilation in order to control any kind of moisture accumulation that was occurring in this crawl space. Well, you can even see from this picture where there was droplets occurring, condensation, even on the bottom of the pipe. And so you can see a little glistening there when we took this picture. And so when we were down there, it was clear from our on-site investigation that moisture control was not occurring in this crawl space, and natural ventilation was not sufficient. If you got a closer look and a different view of the insulation, you can see where between the concrete beams, they have treated this with spray foam. They wrapped the concrete beams. Here's another portion between the concrete beams, and then here's another concrete beam. And even in this picture, from a different perspective, you can see where droplets are occurring on piping systems in the crawl space. And one of the indicators that condensation was not being controlled. But that wasn't the only place that we saw where condensation was forming. If you had a closer look, the insulation in certain areas of this crawl space, there was a significant amount of condensation occurring. So here's the side of one of those concrete beams treated with spray foam. So this would be the infill below the concrete slab, and you can clearly see all of these droplets of condensation that have formed. And so the combination of the way they had designed the open ground with the fact that they had relied upon natural ventilation as a source of controlling accumulated moisture clearly wasn't working and was resulting in the condensation that we saw when we were on site.